Hello, it's Lady Boulay, and welcome back to Black American Lineage. Thank you for your support. Thank you for all you do to support this channel. I know that I have been negligent. I apologize. I haven't posted anything since before Christmas. Somebody reminded me of that just yesterday. So I'm back. Somebody got me back on my game. And today I'm talking about our history. And I'm saying, and I know this might sound arrogant, but the only real history in America is Black American history. Now, this is why I say that. We know our beginning point here. We know our beginning point, and we have everything documented from the first slave ship till now. Now, the indigenous people were already here, and there were also Africans here that they don't want to acknowledge. American historians acknowledge that there were millions of indigenous people here when the Europeans first came. But through disease and through chicanery and war, those numbers dwindled enormously. And what I would say about that is that that's a genocide. Our history is ongoing, it's documented, and it shows progression and regression over time. Now, lately we've been hearing a lot about critical race theory and woke. Those are the buzzwords now. But these two words are really a cover-up. The reality is that Hannah Nicole Jones, an African-American journalist, wrote a piece for the New York Times called The 1619 Project. And in the 1619 Project, she says that American history began when the enslaved people reached these shores, because they are the ones who set the empire in motion. Now, we know that people don't want to acknowledge that, but that's the reality of it. So you might say, well, what about the white people? What about the white people? White people have a very fragmented, you might call it a kind of history. It's haphazard. They don't all have the same lineage. They don't have the same experience. And they didn't work for the empire the way we did. So America doesn't argue the 1619 Project because it's documented. The 1619 Project re-examined slavery's place in American history by putting it at the center of the national narrative and acknowledging the consequences of those decisions. So what the 1619 Project says is, no, slavery is not just a factor in American history. It is American history. It's the center of American history, because before the enslaved people came here and started building this economy and the infrastructure of this country, this land belonged to the indigenous people, and it was dominated by their culture and cultures because they were different nations, and they did not call it the United States of America. It became America when the enslaved people got here and started building it. And the way that America has tried to present it is that they take credit for what the enslaved people did. You hear white people saying, we built the country, we built the country. They wouldn't have any idea what they did. If you say, okay, well, what did you do? They wouldn't know how to answer that question. Ask me what the enslaved people did, and I can tell you. And most black people can tell you. And that's how come they don't want American history told, because they don't want you to know. But some of us actually know. We built the country because we built the country. What is the country? It's the economy. The economy is where you get your money. Where did America get its money before it became a superpower? It was built on agriculture, crops. What crops? Cotton, tobacco, sugarcane, rice, and other crops. Who manned those crops? The enslaved people. That's who. The enslaved people also built the infrastructure, including roads, canals, irrigation systems, bridges, railroads, And anything that was dangerous, who do you think had to do that work? The enslaved people. And for anybody who would be tempted to come on here and tell me that the Chinese built the railroads, let's just be clear. The Chinese may have built the railroads out west after black people showed them how to do it. But the Chinese did not build railroads in the Northeast, in the Midwest, in the Southeast, or the Southwest. Now, they may have done something out in the far west, in California and Montana, but they did not put the basic infrastructure of rails in the United States, okay? Also, architecture. Those plantation homes, the enslaved people had to build and pay for them and work the crops around them so that the family would have money. The enslaved people built those large institutions, universities, churches, whatever hospitals they had. That stuff was built on the backs of the enslaved people, including our central government in Washington, D.C. Those buildings were built by the enslaved people. So that's what we mean when we say we built the country. And this is documented. And they can try to downplay it all they want to. Most of their families weren't even here in 1820 when the enslaved people were working like slaves. So the enslaved people did that work. You don't see any white folks out there picking cotton or cutting down sugar cane. They didn't know how to do it. The enslaved people knew how to do that work. They learned that work in Africa. Then you come over here, white people will say, well, we taught them how to. You cannot teach somebody how to do something that you don't know how to do yourself. You can't lead where you don't go, and you can't teach what you don't know. And that's how come they were so devastated when slavery ended. Because they didn't know how to do the work. They didn't know how to do that work. And they didn't have any money. And even with the inventions in the automobile invention, it's a question about who actually invented the first automobile in the United States. There's a question about that. And we've talked about the telephone, the telegraph, and the light bulb. 3 major inventions in the United States that black men were instrumental in inventing. So black people are having to do all of this. And that's not all. If you Google Black American history, they'll start showing you people like Sammy Davis Jr. and Ella Fitzgerald. And they're right. That's the culture. Black people built the culture. All of the music forms in America originated with the enslaved people. But they very cleverly tried to reduce us to singing and dancing and running and jumping. But we're much more than that. Culture is a part of building a country. The dance forms came from the enslaved people. The foods came from the enslaved people. They brought a lot of the foods that we eat to this day got here via the slave ships. Even down to the storytelling came from the enslaved people. The Uncle Remus stories, the myths, the folk tales, the animal stories where animals are tricksters and outsmarting people. Much of that came from the enslaved people. The culture, you might say. So that's what it means when it says we built the country. And now we used to wouldn't say it because we've been bullied so long. But now we say it because when you say black people built the country, you need to know what you're talking about. What did they build? They built the economy. That's the first thing. Oh, white people didn't know they didn't. No, they didn't. Even they acknowledge that America got on its feet through its agricultural system, mainly cotton, sugarcane, tobacco, rice, and other crops. They used to would tell the truth about it because they thought, well, black people don't know. They can't read. They're stupid. They don't know anything. And then they found out. Not nearly as stupid as you think. So let's put it to the test. When you think about America, what's the first thing you think? George Washington. Well, okay, what do you know about George Washington? He was the first president, and he fought in the Revolutionary War. And he owned Mount Vernon, Plantation Mount Vernon, and he had a lot of slaves. That's all you know. He didn't accomplish anything else. He didn't build anything, he didn't grow anything, and he didn't invent anything. What do we know about Abraham Lincoln? These are just the most popular presidents. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves and then he was assassinated. That's it. Didn't build anything, didn't grow anything, and didn't invent anything. The enslaved people built the country. White people came and occupied the country. Now that's their greatest contribution to America. Occupation. Calling out white folk, come to America and get free land. And then everything was done to prop them up so they could stay in a majority and keep the oppression of the enslaved people, and then later on, African Americans, as we call ourselves, oppressed. That's the major contribution they've made to this country. The real history of America is Black American history. We have a documented history here. So it's not even critical race theory, because all critical race theory says is that white interests were advanced at the expense of black people and indigenous people. That's how critical race theory is, and then it backs it up with laws that were passed through the Supreme Court and other courts. So it's legitimate. They don't want this history taught because this history is documented. It tells the tragic story of how we got here, who brought us here, when we got here, what happened to us after getting here, and the accomplishments we made while we've been here, and the journey that we have been on to survive. That is our history. That is American history. And the reason that America doesn't want this history taught is that we look good and they look bad. Our agency in America, everybody wants to come over here and try to fudge in on whatever Dr. King said, or whatever Rosa Parks did, or whatever the Civil Rights Bill said. But all of that is our history. That's our history. A lot of our history is stored in this building in Washington, D.C., the African American Museum of History and Culture. It is the world's largest museum dedicated to African American history and culture. In 2022, it welcomed 1,092,552 visitors and was second most visited Smithsonian museum and the 8th in the list of most visited museums in the United States. The museum has more than 40,000 objects in its collection, although only about 3,500 items are on display. The 350,000 square foot building and its exhibits have won critical praise. So this is a testament to our history here and who we are as a people. So our history, I say our history, is the only real American history because we built the country. The country was built on the backs of our ancestors. Blood, sweat, and tears and heartache went into building this country, but we survived, and that's a real history. Okay, y'all, let me know what you think about the video. Thank you for listening. Subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, leave a comment, share the video, and as always, have a great day.